Inspectors can be super inconsistent. It's very frustrating. Some get on power trips, and sometimes you got to fight back. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. I'm Ross, been a GC for over a decade, pulled permits in 31 different municipalities across 6 different states, had lots of bouts with different contractors. I'm not saying they're all bad, but today we're going to go through exactly how you put up that fight, how to use the hierarchy of power to your advantage, and how to make a legal and professional argument. So that's what we're going through. And the biggest fight that I ever had was when I had a duplex that was fully rented out. I mean, tenants were living in it. The city friggin' drove by, saw some cracks in the foundation, condemned the property with people living inside of it. I had to kick them out and had to do a full renovation. And to do this, I used what I call the hierarchy of power. I brought in engineers to override some of the things that they were asking me to do. And I got the city to approve it pre-done. And then I did it. And then they tried to decline the inspections for certain reasons. We fought back and forth. I even had to bring an attorney in to make sure that they were actually going to follow the engineer's plans. And it got really messy. Okay. And that kind of stuff happens. And I imagine that if you're a real estate investor like me, you really don't like any time when you learn that there is a power that can tell you what you can and can't do. I know I certainly don't like that. And so sometimes you just have to fight back. And that's the reality. So here's the thing. First is you got to understand the hierarchy of power. And I went through this on some of my other videos in this series. So if you go back to the first video of this series, you'll see that. But basically it's like this. You have the code across the nation, the IRC, the International Residential Code. Your state adopts some version of that. But inside of the state, there's your city or your municipality. That's where you actually pull permits from. And their power supersedes the state, right? They have ordinances that are on top of, that are more than what the state requires. Okay, and then there's actual manufacturer specs. But then on top of all that is the engineer. Okay, and this is really the key ingredient. When things get so bad, okay, an engineer can go outside of the code because they interpret the code. And they can say, well, in this specific scenario, it's a little bit different. But taking the idea of the code, the intended nature of the code, here's the specific plan for this. And if I have that and I have it stamped by the engineer, then the city should take that for multiple reasons. One is the engineer is actually licensed and knows more about it. Two is all the city should probably cares about is removing the liability off of themselves and putting it onto somebody else. So engineer, perfect scapegoat for them. So here's exactly how this went down. The house got condemned. Okay. And first, the city was asking me to remove all of the drywall. And I said no. Okay. Because if you go back a couple of videos before this in the series, I know that if I take off drywall, then I open up this whole can of worms. And that can of worms would have led me to do all kinds of work there because this house, this duplex was built in like the 50s or 60s. And so opening up the walls would have made me have to bring all this stuff up to code, not cut corners, can of worms versus grandfathering. It wouldn't allow things to be grandfathered in once it's exposed. And I knew that. And it really felt like these guys were trying to confuse me into doing that. So I refused. I said, no, I will, I will do this without, I can fix this stuff that you're seeing without actually opening up the walls. And they basically said that they wouldn't be able to do that. And I said, okay, I'll get an engineer then, because he'll let me probe and, show him things that work. And that's basically what we did. We cut out small sections of the drywall that would just need patches so the engineer could see it. He'd make a plan on how to fix that. I would do that fix. He would sign off on it saying it's good to go. And just to add to it a little bit, okay, this specific municipality is if you had to do a renovation that was a dollar amount that was more than 50% of the value of the property, you would have to demo the property. Basically, they were trying to make me tear down the house, right, or the duplex. And the assessed value was super low, which is advantageous in some ways, but it was like, if I took down that drywall, I was for sure going to have to tear down the place, which is a whole different conversation. That could they really make me tear down my house if I was willing to do all of that work? So I knew that I was in some sort of battle from the start. So I did this engineer thing, right? And so that's how you use the hierarchy of power. Okay, you won't look at that, or you're trying to get me to do something that I don't think is right. I'm going to pay to bring an engineer in over the top of this. And next is they walked through and they said that there's too much water underneath the property. So I brought in another engineer and we made a plan to actually pile up dirt on the exterior of the house and then, redirect which way water was going. And then because I brought in all that dirt, I had to shut off all the vents so you can't have an unvented crawl space. So I had to put in power vents. And this was all a plan that I made with the engineer. I had to bring in like rock underneath the house, had to put in plastic so that way if water got in, it could all flow into a sump pump and pump the water out the back. This was all approved by the engineer. We did the work. We did the thing. And the next thing was they said that the floor joists are soft because of that water. So same thing, had an engineer come in, write me a plan to do the floor joists in a certain way with some beams. We did that work, passed. And this is where the problem came in, is that they still weren't straight. Okay, because sometimes when it comes to structural stuff, there's basically the bleeding. So that's what causes the issue. And that was the water in this situation. And then there's the structural part, which is what I had the engineer write up a plan and approve. And then there's the cosmetic part, which is the dipping of the floors. So as long as the dipping is not causing people to trip and become a hazard, then it is simply cosmetic. But the inspector would not let me pass that rough inspection because of the dipping. And I'm like, dude, it's cosmetic. It's none of your business. Like the engineer wrote a plan. I did the plan. They approved the plan. And you got to back off. Of course, I'm saying this in much more professional terms. And so that's where it comes back to the fight. By the way, eventually, after another letter from the engineer saying, basically, I don't care about the dip. It's not a problem. Finally, we got past the rough building inspection here. But the point is, this was a back and forth inside of, emails and the portal and such between me and the head building inspector. So first I was talking with the inspector. This is the important part here. First, I'm talking with the inspector themselves. It got escalated to the head building inspector. So now me and the head building inspector are going back and forth about this. And eventually, the next escalation is an email with not only the head building inspector, but we also CC their boss on there. So you can find that stuff on your local ordinances. And, if you wanted to go beyond that, you go to things like the mayor or whatever. I've never actually done that because I've never felt like it was necessary. But if you're not getting what you think you should get there, you can also bring in an attorney. Okay. And by the way, this is where at the beginning of this process, where the not tearing down the drywall, I actually had to get an attorney involved there to make sure I didn't have to tear down this drywall. And after the back and forth with the attorney, it was decided that I could bring in this engineer. Okay. Now, the escalations. So the next thing would be the attorney, and hopefully at that point, unless you might have to pay some money and do some work or whatever, but you should be able to get past things, hopefully. Now, here's the other thing that I want you to understand is that contractors till the end of time are complaining about inspectors and they're getting screwed over and this guy's on a power trip, and I've certainly been there as well. Most of the time, that's not true. Most of the time, if you go to a job site and you put yourself in that inspector's shoes, you would look at the work that was done and be like, oh, my job is to say that codes are being enforced here. My job is to say that, yes, that is done to code, and yes, that is safe, and it's not going to be a hazard to anybody. And I would put my stamp of approval on that. That is my job and my resume. And you would look at it and be like, hell no, I would not say that. So that is not okay. That looks like trash. I mean, this is embarrassing. Or is this guy a contractor? And most of the time, 99% of the time that I've been pissed off about an inspector thinking that this guy was trying to screw me over, I have then gone to the job site myself, looked at the work that was done, and I'm like, yeah, understood. And think about it. These guys, they have their reputation and their license, whatever, their career on the line. Why are they going to pass one for you? What is that going to do for them? Okay. So, don't expect things that are not. The only gray area there is, the only thing that relationship capital should get you at all is maybe a little bit of leniency on the grandfathering, but otherwise it's code is code, man. And a lot of times stuff is done wrong. These guys have a lot of inspections to do every day. I bet you they're underpaid. I bet you they're overworked. So yeah, can't worry about it too much. But sometimes there is a time to fight. Sometimes there's a time to avoid. There was one inspection that I could not pass. Same inspector, I do think that he had it out for me. And I waited till he went on vacation. And then I called in the inspection and somebody else came in and they passed it. So, there's different strategies for different things. Sometimes you got to fight. And guys, we talk about stuff like this all the time in my free For Now school community. Check it out. Links in the description. And I'll see you guys on this next video.